in it. So love to see it one way or the other. To our reading for this morning, and I have to say it's a bit of a toughie. So this morning we're in Matthew's Gospel. To set the scene, Jesus is just sending his disciples, or apostles as he calls them, out into the villages to tell people the good news about Jesus, and he kind of warns them that some troubles are to come. So anyway, fasten your seatbelts, hard hats on, flat jackets at the ready. Here goes. Matthew chapter 10, starting to read at verse 34. Jesus said, "Do not think that I have come to bring peace on earth. I have not come to bring peace, but a sword. For I have come to set a man against his father, a daughter against her mother, a daughter-in-law against her mother-in-law, and one's foes will be members of one's own household. Whoever loves father or mother more than me is not worthy of me, and whoever loves son or daughter more than me is not worthy of me. And whoever does not take up the cross and follow me is not worthy of me. Those who find their life will lose it, and those who lose their life for my sake will find it. Whoever welcomes you welcomes me, and whoever welcomes me welcomes the one who sent me. Whoever welcomes a prophet in the name of a prophet will receive a prophet's reward, and whoever welcomes a righteous person in the name of a righteous person will receive the reward of the righteous. And whoever gives even a cup of cold water to one of these little ones in the name of a disciple, truly I tell you, none of these will lose their reward." And this is the word of the Lord. Thanks be to God. Wow, okay. Let's just acknowledge from the beginning that this is a seriously tough reading. And I'll give it my best shot this morning. I think the first thing, sort of generically, to understand across the top of this is kind of the language Jesus used to use. You have to remember this was a long time ago. That's not to undermine it any way at all. But the language Jesus uses in his preaching and so on is often, the fancy word for it is hyperbole. It means he uses strong words to make his point. So when he says elsewhere, unless you hate your father and mother, you can't become a disciple of mine or something, he doesn't mean you've got to hate your father. But he's using a strong language to make his point. And I think you have to kind of recognize this here, that Jesus, in order to make his point, is using very, very strong language. That's not to undermine what he's saying, but actually just kind of recognize that's kind of the way they used to speak to each other in those days. And that's kind of the language Jesus was using. So just recognize from the off, Jesus uses hyperbole, strong words, to make his point. So, with that in mind, this is basically in kind of three sections. Firstly, he says, "I do not come to bring peace on earth, but rather a sword." Now, hang on a minute, you're thinking, don't we sing at Christmas, peace on earth, goodwill towards men? Isn't that what we sing at Christmas? Well, I hate to say it, but the Christmas translation is wrong. What it actually says is peace on earth, goodwill on earth to those on whom his favour rests. In other words, the Christian faith, whether we like it or not, does divide people. Some people love it and some people don't. And to those who believe in it, it brings peace and love and harmony, and there's various other things as well. But it has to be recognised that not everybody likes us for it. That people will love our Christian faith, and some people won't. And right down the middle of families and all sorts of things, some people will love the Christian faith, and some people will not, which I think is what he means. To which I've heard it said, well, if it brings division, why do we do it? Except to say that actually all sorts of things bring division. Money brings division in families, doesn't it? Romantic love brings division within families. Job ambition brings division in families. All sorts of things divide people. We don't stop doing those. The real question is the Christian faith right or not? And I think that's the big question we need to ask. It's either right or it isn't. But the fact is, our Christian faith will bring us peace and love and harmony. But some people will not like us for it. And sometimes that can be people close to us who will not approve of our Christian faith too. And I think that's what he means when he says, "I do not come to bring peace, but rather a sword." Not everyone will love our Christian faith. Some people will be very cross about it and find it very difficult. But I think we need to recognise that. There is a division here, that it does divide people, that there are people, as I say, for whom it's the best things that have happened to them, and there are other people who won't appreciate it for all sorts of reasons. And that's what he means when he says, "I do not come to bring peace on earth, but rather a sword." Peace in your heart, peace and shalom, actually, yes, but actually do not expect that everyone will like us or appreciate it for it. That's the first thing. The second thing is no less difficult. He says, basically, anyone who loves their father and their mother more than me is not worthy of me, and anyone who loves their child more than me is not worthy of me. And again, I think Jesus is using hyperbole here. I think he's using strong language to make his point. The first thing being, ultimately, strictly speaking, Jesus is right. Actually, in our Christian faith, God has to come first. God has to be our number one. Recognizing, of course, that in all this, actually, God loves our family more than we do. You know, God loves our parents more than we do. God loves our children even more than we do, actually. So however much we love our families, remembering God loves them more. But ultimately remembering that God is our number one, that Jesus is Lord, and that in a sense, God has to come first. That is not an excuse for bad parenting or being a bad child or whatever it will be. Absolutely not. Because actually putting God first means looking after our families properly. But it does mean ultimately that God has to come first. But let's just be careful, just see the language that Jesus uses here. He says, whoever does not love a father is not worthy of me. And I think that's an interesting phrase, really, is not worthy of me. Because actually, you know, if we think about it, none of us is worthy of him. Actually, to some extent, I could argue that even if we do take up our cross, even if we do love God more than our parents and our children or everyone, even then actually none of us is worthy of him. So actually I think the language he uses is quite careful there, because ultimately we're all sinners. None of us is worthy of him. We're all in the same boat. None of us is worthy at all. We only are what we are because Jesus has called us, you know. None of us thinking like that. Actually none of us is worthy. And I think we need to remember that too. So, you know, so just something, I think it's quite careful the language he uses here. It's not worthy of me, because actually none of us is. But the amazing thing about the Christian faith is that even though we're not worthy, Jesus still loves us and gave his life for us. That actually, even though we're not worthy, God so loved the world that he gave his only son, Jesus Christ, and so on and so on and so on. So that, you know, all these people are actually, you're not worthy of me, but actually, in some extent, none of us is. But we only are what we are by the grace of God. So that's the second bit. The third thing is actually quite exciting. He talks about whoever receives you receives me, and whoever receives me receives the one who sent me. And I think this is tremendous, really, that, you know, if you receive to receive Jesus into your heart is to receive God into your heart. And by being a friend of Jesus, we're being a friend of God. And by serving Jesus, we are serving God. But he actually takes it a bit further, because he says, you know, even if you bring a cup of water to a disciple, you'll receive a reward for that. And so by serving each other, we are serving Jesus. And by serving Jesus, we are serving God. And by helping each other, we're helping Jesus, if you like, and we are serving God. And that there's a tremendous view here that I can say that by receiving the people of God, what we do to the people of God, we do to God. And there's a passage about the sheep and the goats in Matthew 25 as well, which kind of expands it a bit further. But also to say that, you know, later on when times get difficult, and in the Christian faith, when other people help us, they can be sure that they're not just helping us, they're helping Jesus, and in helping Jesus, they are helping God. And I think it's tremendously exciting here that by serving each other, we are serving God. And there's a good motive for doing that as well. Like I say, when we serve each other, we are serving God. And I think that's a good thing to remember today. So, one mightily tough reading here. Jesus using, say, very strong language. But I think sort of three sections in the reading this morning. Firstly, the message of Jesus Christ, there's no question, it does bring division. People either love it, and it's either the best thing that's ever happened to us, it's the love of God in our hearts and so on. But we need to remember that people won't always like us for it. And it can, and it does bring division. And sometimes even close to home in our own household. Secondly, to remember that actually we are to put God first. But ultimately, none of us is worthy of Jesus anyway. And actually, we only are what we are because Jesus calls us. What did Jesus say? You did not choose me. I chose you. So ultimately, we need to put God first. But actually, none of us ultimately is worthy. But also to remember that when we serve each other, we are serving Jesus. And when we are serving Jesus, we are serving God. And that's a pretty good motivation for work, for service, for love in the church and beyond. Hope that makes sense. Tough reading this morning. God bless you. Have a lovely weekend. I hope to see you in church physically or online. And if not, I'll see you on Monday. God